Hi everyone, my name is Nina. I'm an alumni of the Southampton Fresh Air Home. I went to camp for 10 summers, and I hope that you guys are having a good time so far at the virtual camp this summer. I'm here today for SFAH Book Club, and before I get into that, a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Queens. Now I live in Brooklyn, where I'm going to graduate school. I'm studying to be a psychologist. I wanted to do book club because I've always had an interest in reading. I think I had a pretty roundabout way of getting into psychology. I initially wanted to study literature and write books, and I realized, I think throughout that process, what I loved so much about that was getting to understand people and to hear people's stories. And I've always loved to write. And I think part of that is, we don't often see disabled people in books or in media where we're portrayed in a way that is nuanced and accurate and gives us justice. And the book that I'm going to talk about today is The Fault in Our Stars. And I'm sure probably some of you have already read it. It's a pretty popular book. I read it when I was in high school. And it was my first time ever reading something that portrayed someone with an illness or a medical condition in a way that let them be a full person. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes when we get portrayed in media, we're kind of just always sad about being disabled or ill or whatever, and that's not something we should deny, because that is sometimes a part of our experience. But what often gets that often gets very hyper focused on, and we don't get to talk about other aspects of our life. And this book portrayed Hazel, the main character, who has cancer, which is obviously not the same thing as physical disability, but it portrayed someone with a medical condition as just a teenage girl living life and falling in love and doing all of the things that a lot of teenagers with medical conditions want to see. So I'm going to read a little bit of the first part, and I recommend you guys to pick up where I leave off if you haven't read it. Even if you have, maybe you want to read it a second time. So I'm going to read part of chapter 1. So, late in the winter of my 17th year, my mother decided I was depressed. Presumably because I rarely left the house, spent quite a lot of time in bed, read the same book over and over, ate infrequently, and devoted quite a bit of my abundant free time thinking about death. Whenever you read a cancer booklet or website or whatever, they always list depression among the side effects of cancer, but in fact, depression is not a side effect of cancer. Depression is a side effect of dying. Cancer is also a side effect of dying. Almost everything is, really. But my mom believed I required treatment, so she took me to see my regular Dr. Jim, who agreed that I was veritably swimming in a paralyzing and totally clinical depression, and that therefore my meds should be adjusted and I also should attend a weekly support group. This support group featured a rotating cast of characters in various states of tumor-driven unwellness. Why did the cast rotate? A side effect of dying. The support group, of course, was depressing as hell. It met every Wednesday in the basement of a stone-walled Episcopal church shaped like a cross. We all sat in a circle right in the middle of the cross, where the two boards would have met, where the heart of Jesus would have been. I noticed this because Patrick, the support group leader and the only other person over 18 in the room, talked about the heart of Jesus every freaking meeting, all about how we, as young cancer survivors, were sitting right in Christ's very sacred heart and whatever. So here's how it went in God's heart. The 6 or 7 or 10 of us walked/wheeled in, grazed at a decrepit selection of cookies and lemonade, sat down in the circle of trust, and listened to Patrick recount for the 1000th time his depressingly miserable life story. How he had cancer in his balls and they thought he was going to die, but he didn't die, and now here he is, a full-grown adult in a church basement in the 137th nicest city in America, divorced, addicted to video games, mostly friendless, eking out a meager living by exploiting his cancer-tastic past, slowly working his way towards a master's degree that will not improve his career prospects, waiting, as we all do, for the sword to give him the relief that he escaped low those many years ago when cancer took both of his nuts but spared what only the most generous soul would call his life. And you too might be so lucky. Then we introduced ourselves. Name, age, diagnosis, and how we're doing today. I'm Hazel, I'd say, when they'd get to me. 16, thyroid originally, but with an impressive and long-settled satellite colony in my lungs. And I'm doing okay. Once we got around the circle, Patrick always asked if anyone wanted to share. And then began the circle jerk of support, everyone talking about fighting and battling and winning and shrinking and scanning. To be fair to Patrick, he let us talk about dying too. But most of them weren't dying. Most would live until adulthood, as Patrick had. Which meant there was quite a lot of competitiveness about it, with everybody wanting to beat not only cancer itself, but also the other people in the room. Like, I realize that this is irrational, but when they tell you you have, say, a 20% chance of living 5 years, the math kicks in, and you figure that's 1 in 5, so you look around and think, as any healthy person would, I gotta outlast 4 of these bastards. The only redeeming facet of support group was this kid named Isaac. A long-faced, skinny guy with straight blonde hair swept over one eye. And his eyes were the problem. He had some fantastically improbable eye cancer. One eye had been cut out when he was a kid, and now he wore the kind of thick glasses that made his eyes, both the real and the glass one, very huge. Like his whole head was basically just this fake eye and this real eye staring at you. From what I could gather on the rare occasions when Isaac shared with the group, a recurrence had placed his remaining eye in mortal peril. Isaac and I communicated almost exclusively through sighs. Each time someone discussed anti-cancer diets or snorting ground-up shark fin or whatever, he'd glance over at me and sigh ever so slightly. I'd shake my head microscopically and exhale in response. So the support group blew, and after a few weeks I grew to be rather kicking and screaming about the whole affair. In fact, on the Wednesday I made the acquaintance of Augustus Waters. I tried my level best to get out of support group, while sitting on the couch with my mom in the third leg of a 12-hour marathon of the previous season's America's Next Top Model, which admittedly I had already seen, but still. Me, I refused to go to support group. Mom, one of the symptoms of depression is disinterest in activities. Me, please just let me watch America's Next Top Model. It's an activity. Mom, television is a passivity. Me, ugh, Mom, please. Mom, Hazel, you're a teenager. You're not a little kid anymore. You need to go make friends, get out of the house, and live your life. If you want me to be a teenager, don't send me to support group. Buy me a fake ID so I can go to clubs, drink vodka, and take pot. You don't take pot, for starters. See, that's the kind of thing I would know if you gave me a fake ID. Mom says, you're going to support group. Hazel, you deserve a life. That shut me up. Although I failed to see how attendance at a support group met the definition of life. Still, I agreed to go after negotiating the right to record the 1.5 episodes of America's Next Top Model I'd be missing. I went to support group for the same reason that I'd once allowed nurses with a mere 18 months of graduate education to poison me with exotically named chemicals. They wanted to make my parents happy. There's only one thing in this world shittier than biting it from cancer when you're 16, and that's having a kid who bites it from cancer. Mom pulled into the circular driveway behind the church at 4:56. I pretended to fiddle with my oxygen tank for a second just to kill time. Do you want me to carry it in for you? No, it's fine, I said. The green tank only weighed a few pounds, and I had this little steel cart to wheel it around behind me. It delivered 2 liters of oxygen to me each minute through a cannula, a transparent tube that split just beneath my neck, wrapped behind my ears, and then reunited in my nostrils. The contraption was necessary because my lungs sucked at being lungs. I love you, she said as I got out. You too, Mom. See you at 6. Make friends, she said through the roll-down window as I walked away. I didn't want to take the elevator, because taking the elevator is the last day's kind of activity at support group, so I took the stairs. I grabbed a cookie and poured some lemonade into a Dixie cup, and then I turned around. A boy was staring at me. I was quite sure I'd never seen him before. Long and leanly muscular, he dwarfed the molded plastic elementary school chair he was sitting in. Mahogany hair, straight and short, he looked around my age, maybe a little older, and he sat with his tailbone against the edge of the chair. His posture was aggressively poor, one hand half in his pocket of his dark jeans. I looked away, suddenly conscious of my myriad of insufficiencies. I was wearing old jeans, which had once been tight but now sagged in weird places, and a yellow t-shirt advertising a band I didn't even like anymore. Also, my hair, I had this page boy haircut, and I hadn't even bothered to, brush it. Furthermore, I had ridiculously fat, chipmunked cheeks, a side effect of treatment. I looked like a normally proportioned person with a balloon for a head. This was not even to mention the cankle situation, and yet I caught a glance to him, and his eyes were still on me. It occurred to me why they call it eye contact. I walked into the circle and sat down next to Isaac, 2 seats away from the boy. I glanced again. He was still watching me. Look, let me say it. He was hot. A non-hot boy stares at you relentlessly, and it is at best awkward, at worst a form of assault. But a hot boy, well... I pulled out my phone and I clicked it to display the time. 4:59. The circle filled in with the unlucky 12 to 18s, and then Patrick started us out with the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The guy was still staring at me. I felt rather blushy. Finally, I decided that the proper strategy was to stare back. Boys do not have a monopoly on the staring business, after all, so I looked him over as Patrick acknowledged for the 1000th time his balllessness, etc., and soon it was a staring contest. After a while, the boy smiled, and then finally his blue eyes glanced away. When he looked back at me, I flicked my eyebrows up to say, I win. He shrugged. Patrick continued, and then finally it was time for the introductions. Isaac, perhaps you'd like to go first today. I know you're facing a challenging time. Yeah, Isaac said. I'm Isaac. I'm 17. And it's looking like I have to get surgery in a couple weeks, after which I'll be blind. Not to complain or anything, because I know a lot of us have it worse, but yeah, I mean, being blind does sort of suck. My girlfriend helps, though, and friends like Augustus. He nodded towards the boy, who now had a name. So yeah, Isaac continued. He was looking at his hands, which he'd folded into each other, like the top of a teepee. There's nothing you can do about it. We're here for you, Isaac, Patrick said. Let Isaac hear it, guys, and then we all, in a monotone, said, We're here for you, Isaac. Michael was next. He was 12. He had leukemia. He'd always had leukemia. He was okay. Or so he said. He'd taken the elevator. Lita was 16, and pretty enough to be the object of the hot boy's eye. She was a regular, in a long remission from appendiceal cancer, which I had not previously known existed. She said, as she had every other time I'd attended support group, that she felt strong, which felt like bragging to me as the oxygen drizzling nubs tickled my nostrils. There were 5 others before they got to him. He smiled a little when his turn came. His voice was low, smoky, and sexy. My name is Augustus Waters, he said. I'm 17. Had a little touch of osteocarcinoma a year and a half ago, but I'm just here today at Isaac's request. And how are you feeling? Asked Patrick. Oh, I'm grand, Augustus Waters smiled with the corner of his mouth. I'm on a roller coaster that only goes up, my friend. When it was my turn, I said, my name is Hazel. I'm 16. Thyroid with mets in my lungs. I'm okay. All right, guys. So that is the first half of chapter 1. I hope that you continue reading. I wish you guys the best rest of virtual summer camp, and I hope to see you all soon, hopefully in person next summer. Take care.